5 stages of deck building. Interesting idea, don't you think? Or maybe 5 levels of deck builders. Alright, and we're not talking about building a deck out the back of your house. We're talking about Pokemon decks, okay? And I invite you to play along at home. Maybe tell me what you think about what I'm going to say here, but I was having a bit of think. Okay, so when I think about people who are on their journey of discovery when it comes to Pokemon cards, there's sort of levels, if you like. Levels of skill level and understanding of what they're trying to do. So we'll start at what I call, at level 1, I would call this, we'll just call it a newbie. Alright. The newbie is somebody who knows the rules of how to build a deck. So they know how to build a deck. You know, 60 cards, etc. And that's about it. They just put in whatever cards they own into one deck, and there's not really any strategy at all. It's just whatever they think is the best cards that they own, slammed into a deck, off they go. Right? They go off to their local league. They've got a menagerie of cards. They've got, like, you know, their Suicune and maybe an Alchemy and a Simisear V. And they've got, like, a Charizard V-Star, but they forgot to put the Charizard V in, and, like, it's not, there's no strategy at all, okay? And they build a deck, 60 cards, there's not really any cohesion, not really much to say there, right? Except that they're obviously very new to the concept of building a Pokemon deck. And I should say that something I do want to say is that I think that they're unaware. So unaware of deck building concepts. Deck building is very abstract. When you think about it, building a Pokemon deck is not it's not a very easy thing to explain. Like, how do you explain the idea of deck building to somebody who's never had who has no concept of how to build an effective deck? It's very hard. It's very, very hard. And it takes a really long time to learn that sort of thing. Okay, when somebody looks at a football player or a soccer player, it kind of makes sense, the skills that you have to learn, even if you don't know or have the skill to be able to recognize the totality of the skills that a sports person might have to learn. Pokemon cards is very different. It's very difficult to understand and recognize the skills needed, especially with deck building, because it's such an abstract concept. It's very difficult to enunciate. And so we move on to the second level of what constitutes a deck builder. So the second stage is they have some awareness. So let's say the flavor-based deck builder. So this player has a strategy in mind, but it's not competitive in terms of effectiveness. So I'll just say not competitive or effective. And what do I mean by that? I mean that this player, their strategy is something very simple or broad. It might be, I'm going to build a grass Pokemon deck. Okay, and then they fill their deck full of grass Pokemon. So instead of just, you know, throwing in all the cards that they own that have the biggest HP and attacks, this player has decided that they want to build around a theme, but it may not necessarily be competitive. For example, grass deck. And the theme that combines a grass deck would be Pokemon that are grass type using grass energies. Okay, so a flavor-based deck will be a bit more effective than the newbie deck, but it's still not in that competitive sphere. Now, stage 3. Let's call them the strategic deck builder. So this would be the average TCG competitor is able to recognize that in Pokemon, and just as it is in other card games like Magic the Gathering, you don't just say, I'm going to build a green deck or a blue deck. You might describe it that way, but the strategies within the colors can be quite diverse. So in Pokemon, rather than saying, I'm going to build a water deck, you might say, I'm going to build an Arceus deck that makes use of powerful water Pokemon. And so the strategy there is not inherently based in the typing of the card, but more the effectiveness of the strategy. Looks to build a deck with strong strategies in order to win. Okay, so, and I think that statement, in order to win, is important because there's intention there. It's not just about building a deck that makes you feel like a Pokemon trainer. You are acknowledging the game for what it is and looking to build a deck that's competitive. And so I would say that the average deck builder, I would say that I fall into that bucket. So I'm a strategic deck builder. I build decks that have some compelling reason to have the cards together and attempt to win with those cards. So, acknowledges the metagame, awareness of the top tier decks. Okay, those are the last things that I'll say on that. And then, moving on to number 4, so this is when you're starting to reach the higher echelons of deck building, let's just say highly competitive deck builder. So, to be a highly competitive deck builder, you must have an innate understanding of the current metagame. And this player will take popular archetypes and push the boundaries. / discover intricate relationships between them. Alright, so this player not only understands that Mew VMAX is an extremely strong deck and has a very powerful strategy, this player will also test many different ways and get right down into the micro level of these decks, right down to like the individual cards, to decide what is the best look for this deck. So, you know, interested in finding the perfect 60 for an event. Okay, so this player will be the one that innovates. They're innovative within different archetypes. They'll be the ones that set the stage for the metagame going forward and show everybody else that, like, this is the way that you're supposed to do it. Sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but that's Pokemon for you. Doesn't matter who you are, you have a bad day. It can just not work out for you. And I think that is one of the things that makes Pokemon very... To me, it's very impressive, the players that consistently do well. Because it is a very skillful game, and it is very... I mean, the skillfulness of it can vary from meta to meta. I think that it is very skillful at the moment, and it's just very impressive. The players that are able to be consistently good for a very long time. And the last level of deck builder that I'll talk about is the Defiance deck builder. So, I would say that this is where the world of the rogue deck player exists in. And so this player views the card pool and strategies holistically. So they're able to look at everything under one lens and consider cards and strategies which look very different from the established norms in order to come up with a solution. So they This player is able to build decks which defy established norms and patterns about the metagame and exploits commonalities in order to win. The decks appear very unconventional and may be difficult to grasp. Okay? The Defiant deck builder might arrive at a tournament with a deck that looks very bizarre. You've seen it multiple times this season with Sander, and that player's various stall decks. The Elder Goss one very recently is a very good example of that, where the deck had a very unconventional win condition of looping Elder Goss and using Umbreon at the very end of the game. And I mean, that player, I think, theorized that stall loop for a very long time, so it was very satisfying to see them do quite well, even if Sander didn't make top 8 with the deck. Still very impressive to see that deck piloted and to see it on stream as well. Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, that's it. Short and sweet, I think. Those are the 5 stages of deck builders, in my opinion. Any idea where you might sit in this 5? I think the third bucket, I would expect most people watching this channel probably sit in here. Yeah, I just thought I would put my words to visual paper, so to speak, and talk about it a little. Because I think it's an interesting concept to think about. I might throw this up as a community poll on my channel as well, in some form. And see how you all rate yourselves as deck builders.